theyeshiva.net.
Daf Ches Amud Aleph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 lines from the top. After completing the discussion on why the Mishnah does not count the other Rosh Hashanahs that seem to be included in the that are included in the Brisa, namely the 16th of Nisan and the 6th day of Sivan, and the Gemarah went through various explanations whether we only count Rosh Hashanahs that include the Rosh Hashanah consists of a full night and day, a 24-hour period. That was Rav Papa's interpretation. Or the second interpretation, Rav Shisha, was the Rosh Hashanahs in our Mishnah include something that doesn't require action on behalf of the Jew. It just comes automatic. Or finally, Reb Ashi's final interpretation, that when it says 4 Rosh Hashanah, it means the 4 Rosh Hashanah that happen to be also on Rosh Chodesh. They're not only the beginning of a year, they're also the beginning of a month, which of course makes it much more of a Rosh Hashanah, because a year never ends in the middle of a month. Years have to consist of full months. Just like a month, so a year never ends in the middle of a month, right? The year ends at the end of a month. So when you say Rosh Hashanah is on Rosh Chodesh, that's a much more, so to speak, genuine Rosh Hashanah, because you can actually say it's the beginning of a new year. You could say Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan is the beginning of a new year. Rosh Chodesh El is the beginning of a new year. Tezayin Nisan or Vav Sivan is the middle of a month. So yes, it's Rosh Hashanah for a particular thing in terms of Omer, but Rashi says that's not the type, that's not the genre of Rosh Hashanahs that we're addressing in the Mishnah. We're talking about those that are Rosh Chodesh. And those are only 4. There are 4 Rosh Hashanahs that are on Rosh Chodesh. Number 1, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Number 2, Rosh Chodesh Elul. Number 3, Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. And number 4, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, Kidivrei Beis Shammai, Light by Shammai. Of course, according to Beis Hillel, there would only be 3 Rosh Hashanahs that are Rosh Chodesh. So according to everybody, it's 3. According to Beis Shammai, it would be actually 4. Now, of course, there are those who hold that 8a-8b is also not a Rosh Hashanah. For example, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, right? So therefore, there would only be 2. There would only be 2. Why? Because there'd be Rosh Chodesh Nisan and Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, and unless they hold like Beis Shammai, it would only be 2, Rosh Chodesh Nisan and Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. So when he says, according to everybody, it's 3, Rashi points out, it doesn't mean according to everybody in the Mishnah. According to Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, it may only be 2. It means according to Rabbi in Beis Shammai's Shitta. If you say Beis Shammai's Shitta, if you say Beis Hillel's Shitta, then it would be only 3. Rabbi holds like Beis Hillel, because usually we say halacha ke Beis Hillel, so it would be only 3, because Rosh Chodesh Shvat would not be counted, and as we explained, the Vilna Gaon says that's the diuk in Kidivrei Beis Shammai. Which now brings the Gemarah to the next shtickle Mishnah to discuss the very basis of the idea when we start Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema. So now the Gemarah starts analyzing the next shtickle in the Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon Oimrim. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema is be'echad b'tishrei. Earlier, the Gemarah already quoted the Shitta that it's be'echad be'elul and explained that that's the Shitta of Reb Meir. And Rabbi holds like Reb Meir when it comes to Ma'aseh Behema, and that's why he quotes it without a name. And we got into the whole discussion of why there are Chamisha. There are Chamisha. But now the Gemarah actually discusses the very concept of the date of Ma'aseh Behema. So we have a machlokes when Ma'aseh Behema begins. Reb Meir holds it's Echad Be'elul, and that's quoted in the Mishnah as the first Shitta, a Stam Mishnah, Echad Be'elul, Rosh Hashanah L'Ma'aseh Behema. Then we have Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say it's be'echad b'tishrei. Now, what does this mean? Before we get into the source, we have to know what does it mean. What it means is, as we have explained, a Jew who has a farm and he owns cows and sheep. And of course, mother cows and mother sheep give birth to baby cows, what we call calves, agolim and tloyim, which are baby sheep. And the halacha dictates, the pasuk in Bechokaisai dictates that what? That you have to put all of these newborn animals into a corral and have a narrow door, an entrance, and then have them go out and then count. And every 10th becomes holy. Ha'asiri yiyeh kodesh l'Hashem, thank you. And that becomes a carbon which we call meiser, behema, which you bring to Yerushalayim. You sacrifice in the Beis HaMikdash, you sprinkle the blood on the Mizbeach, and then you're free to enjoy and eat the carbon according to the halachas of a carbon, what's called kadoshim kalim, the lighter carbonas. In other words, you can eat it in the whole region of Yerushalayim till within the fortress, within the chayma, for the prescribed period of time, and according to the halachas that dictate how you eat a carbon in terms of tahara, the purity that you have to have, the time limits, etc., and the place where you eat it. That is meiser behema. Clear. What's negei Rosh Hashanah? So you have meiser behema, you have meiser behema. I have newborn sheep, so I have to make a cheshbon. These are the new babies. I have to give meiser. If I only have 9, I don't have meiser. If I have 15, I have 1 meiser. If I have 20, I have 2 meisers. If I have 100, I have 10 meisers. And what do you need a Rosh Hashanah for? What's a Rosh Hashanah for? When it's born, it's born. The answer, of course, is because the Torah also tells us that it has to be year by year, from which we learn that I can't give meiser from the babies that are born, the baby animals born 1 year, for those that are born in another year. So, for example, if in Tovshin Ayin Zayin I had 9 baby sheep, but Tovshin Ayin Vav I had 1 more baby sheep, I don't give meiser. I don't have meiser behema. You know why? Because Tovshin Ayin Vav is 1 cheshbon, Tovshin Ayin Zayin is a separate cheshbon. If Tovshin Ayin Zayin I have many animals, and Tovshin Ayin Vav I had many, and I just give meiser from Tovshin Ayin Vav, also for those of Tovshin Ayin Zayin, also for those of Tovshin Ayin Vav, right? I ignore those. Let's say Tovshin Ayin Vav I had 10. Tovshin Ayin Zayin I have another 10. So I want to give meiser from this new group for that group. It doesn't work. Every year gets its own meiser. So now the question is, when does the year begin? What's considered the year? What's cutoff time? Comes the Mishnah and says it's Rosh Chodesh Elul. Meaning, if Chav Tes Av, I had an animal, a baby sheep. Rosh Chodesh Elul, I have another 9 and no more during that year, I don't give meiser. If I have during that year 10 or 20, I have to give 2 meisers. I have 100, I have to give 10 meisers. Come Rebbe Lazar and Reb Shimon and say wrong date, Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Now the question is, where would they come up with this date? Why would they come up with this date? Was is Elul Tishrei? Why not Tevis? Why not Shvat? Zog the Gemarah, Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Ushneim Mikra Echad Darshu. Both of them. Reb Meir, who says Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema is the first of Elul, and Reb Elazar and Reb Shimon, who say it's the first day of Tishrei, actually are both using the same pasuk. They derive their shita, their view, from the same pasuk. Of course, everybody explains the pasuk in a different way. What's the pasuk? Shenema. Very interesting way how they learn out their halacha. There's a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter Samachay, Tehillim kapitel Samachay 65, pasuk Yud Dalet. The Mishnah is literally, the Pedic, that chapter, that kapitel in Tehillim is talking about the blessings of rain that Hashem gives. Zok the pasuk, Lofshu chorim hatzoin va'amokim ya'atfuvor Yisroi A'u Af Yashiru. Lofshu Chorim Hatzoin means Chorim Hatzoin, Tzoin, are flock sheep. Chorim are a fat, robust, well-fed, satiated, healthy sheep. Lofshu Chorim Hatzoin. The fat sheep got dressed. What does it mean they got dressed? They got an extra layer of skin because they became pregnant. That's what Lofshu Chorim Hatzoin. They got dressed. In other words, they became pregnant, which is, as Tosfos says, a nice way of saying that they have now a baby inside, a baby lamb inside their womb. Va'amokim yatfu vor, amokim means the depths, the valleys, from the word oimek, deep. Va'amokim, the valleys, yatfu vor, become covered. Yatfu means they become covered like lis atef batzitzis, atifas talis. They become bedekt. Wrapped. Bar with tvua. Bar means grain. Yisroi au af yoshiru. Yisroi au means they sing, they celebrate. Yom Trua, they celebrate af yoshiru, and they also sing. So the pasuk is talking about the blessings of the lambs being pregnant, the mother sheep's being pregnant, the valleys filling up with grain, and the grain celebrating, dancing. Yisroi au, they're dancing and they are singing. What is the meaning of this pasuk? Zok the Gemarah. Reb Meir Sova, Reb Meir Zokt, a Mosai love Shucharim Atzoin. When is the time that the sheep become pregnant? Bizman Shamokim Yatfu Vor. The same time when the valleys become wrapped by the new grain. Ve'e Mosai, when is this? Ve'e Mosai Amokim Yatfu Vor, when is this? We all know, there's no question, it's Ba'adar. It's the month of Adar. In the season of Eretz Yisrael, that's the time when the first stalks of grain, of tvua, will begin growing. Before that is the winter season. In Adar you have that the amokim, the valley, start filling with grain. Therefore, what do we learn from here? He says, now we have a fact, we know. How long is the gestation, how long is the pregnancy period for lamb? Anybody knows? 5 months. 5 months. Right? If you look it up, it'll be approximately 150, 152 days, 148 days, 149 days, which is approximately 5 months. Zok Reb Meir. If the pasuk is telling me that they become pregnant when the time of Amakim Yatfu Vor in the month of Adar, so he says, Emasai Amakim Yatfu Vor Ba'adar. Misabrais Ba'adar hastes that the sheep become pregnant in the month of Adar, and therefore V'yoldos Ba'av. And then they will give birth in the month of Av, because the time of pregnancy is approximately 5 months. So therefore in the month of Adar, that's usually the time they become pregnant. So therefore, say even those who become pregnant at the end of Adar, so you'll have Nisan and Iyar and Sivan and Tammuz.
You're forgetting about the cattle portion of it right now.
Yes.
That exists.
Yes. Good question.
Is 9 months, I think, no?
Yes. Gemarah in B'chayres Daf Ches goes through all the pregnancies of many animals. Behema Daka, Chamisha Chadashim. Behema Daka is like sheep, that type of animal. And Behema Gasa, Tishrei Chadashim. More Dakas than Gasas, right? So B'meila, what's the connection? So Reb Meir says, B'meila, he says, Misabris Ba'adav V'yeldas Ba'av. So when is Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah Shalahen is Elul. He says, I'm very practical. The sheep came to the world. What's their first Rosh Hashanah? What's the beginning of their first month? Not Av, because they're usually born in the month of Av. So what would be a Rosh Hashanah that begins a new month, a new year for them? When will I do it? I do it the first opportunity. It's Rosh Hashanah. Is it possible that you have sheep at a different time of the year? Of course it's possible. But when I have to establish a Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema, what's the best day to establish? The best day is to establish the first Rosh Hashanah for the sheep that are born in the month of Av, and that would be the first day of the next available month. It's not Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, it's Rosh Chodesh Elul. So that becomes the Rosh Hashanah. So practically speaking, the sheep that are born till then are in 1 year, and Rosh Hashanah begins a whole new year, Rosh Chodesh Elul. That's Reb Meir. What do Reb Elazar and Reb Shimon know? This is all Reb Yochanan explaining. What do Reb Elazar and Reb Shimon say? A Masai love Shucharim Atzoin. When do the sheep become pregnant? Not when Amokim Yatfu Vor. The next part of the pasuk. Bizman Sheyisroi Au Af Yoshiru. When the grain is dancing and singing. Now we have to understand what it means. The grain is dancing and singing. We'll see in a moment. A Masai Shibolim Oimnim Shira. When do the stalks of grain start singing? Anybody knows? Do you ever see? When do the stalks start singing? Zog the Gemarah b'Nisan. The singing starts in Nisan. They become wrapped, the valleys become covered by grain, wrapped in grain and other. But when they start singing in the month of Nisan. B'meila misabris b'Nisan. So the time of pregnancy is Nisan. Therefore, V'yeld is Be'elul. So birth is Elul because gestation is 5 months. So therefore, Rosh Hashanah Shalahen Tishrei. So therefore, we say Rebbe Elazar and Reb Shimon say Rosh Hashanah is the first available month afterwards. They come into the world. And the beginning of the new year is Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Let's see Rashi. Zok Rashi. Lafshu Charim Hatzayin. Mikru b'Sefer Tehillim. It's a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 65. Samachay. Lafshu Charim Hatzayin. Amakim Yatfu Vo Yisrael Af Yeshiru. Zok Rashi. Lafshu Charim Hatzayin means mislapshes hakvasim. The sheep become dressed. What does it mean they become dressed? Shemis abres. They become pregnant. In other words, an additional layer is added to them, so we call it a lavush. A lavush. They're carrying a baby. Yatfu var. The valleys become covered with grain. Shahazriyat semachas. Because what we planted grows. V'nikeres yafa. And it's well recognized. That's why he says yatfu. It becomes covered. In other words, it's not just if it's starting to grow, it's earlier. But yatfu doesn't mean that it's starting to grow. Yatfu means it's covered. It's bedecked. That's what Rashi says. V'nikeres yafa. You could see very well that these are fields that have grain. That's the diuk of Rashi. Nikeres yafa. In other words, it's not the early stages of growth. It's later stages. Yisrael af yashiru. The grain dances and also sings. What does this mean? It's like Rashi ben Nisan. This is in the month of Nisan. In Nisan, you don't only have grain growing in a recognizable way, but it means something else. Zman hakotzer. Nisan is already the beginning of harvest time. V'hatvua b'kashim shalom. The tvua already develops maturity in the kashim shalom in its stalks. V'haruach menasheves. And the spring breeze starts blowing. So therefore the stalks of grain bump into each other. Noikshim means they clap, they pound on each other. Nishma hakoil. And therefore the voice is heard, and it appears that they are swaying and dancing and singing. They're dancing because they're swaying back and forth, and they're singing in the sense that you can hear the koilas from the banging of the tvu against each other. So Rashi's man ibur behemedaka chamisha chadashim. What you have to understand in this Gemarah is that the time of pregnancy of what we call a behemedaka, a thin or a weaker or a smaller animal like a sheep, is 5 months. B'meila says Reb Meir Rosh Hashanah Shalahen Elul the samach ligmaroi zman chadash the samach ligmaroi. I'm going to read according to the Hagai Sabach. The samach ligmaroi hu zman chadash. The samach l'gemarah, close after it gets born. Gemarah means when it's completed, it gets born. Whose man? That is the time of chadash v'yashin shalem l'chidush hashana. That is the time to describe the new year or the old year in terms of a new year coming. That is the shita of Reb Meir. Love shucharim atzayin when amakim yatfu var, which is the month of Adar. What's the shita of Reb Elazar and Reb Shimon? Love shucharim atzayin is only Yisrael af yashiru, in other words, in Nisan. So therefore, bisman she Yisrael hashibolim, when the stalks start dancing, that's when they give. That's when they become pregnant. So the birth is not an Av but an Elul, and therefore Rosh Hashanah is Tishrei. The same pasuk is used in 2 different ways by these different Tanoim to describe and to deduce when is Rosh Hashanah l'maisa be'er. Frag the Gemarah, 1 second. V'idach nami, according to the Meir, haksiv Yisrael af yashiru. How can he ignore the continuation of the pasuk? It doesn't only say lav shucharim atzoyin amakim yatfu var. It says Yisrael af yashiru. That means the pregnancy happens when the stalks of grain are dancing and singing, which is not an Adar, it's a Nisan. So how can he say that the pregnancy is an Adar? And for the Gemarah, hahu ba'aflasa, the havim benis. Reb Meir recognizes that there are aflasa. Aflasa means latecomers. Sheep that are latecomers, mekratz tzachos habissel, they have time. So therefore their pregnancy season is in the month of Nisan. So most sheep, he says, get pregnant in the month of Adar, which is amakim yatfu var. And then there's Yisrael af yashiru, which is a later stage. So of course, Reb Meir recognizes that there are sheep that become pregnant later, but that's ba'aflasa. Rashi says, "Ahu ba'aflasa yesh lach tzoyin ha'ma'atifos." You have in Parshas Vayetze, right? Ubaha'atif hatzoyin. So Rashi says over there in the story of Yaakov and the sheep and the sticks, the sheep that come later. Hamatifois u'misacharois lekabel zocher ad Nisan. It takes them a little more time to accept the male and the relationships till the month of Nisan. Most happen in the month of Adar. That is what Reb Meir is tining. So therefore there are sheep that give birth in Elul, but most of them give birth in Av, and therefore in terms of Maisa we follow the majority, and we describe Rosh Hashanah as the first day of Elul.
Rosh Hashanah on Elul or Rosh Hashanah, all the late,
of course,
late one is
it's a different year. You're right. Once you establish a Rosh Hashanah, you establish a Rosh Hashanah. The new sheep that are born in Elul already belong to the new year. You're right. Now let's go the other opinion. Reb Lazar and Reb Shimon, who say that the time of pregnancy is Nisan Haksiv. It says in the same pasuk, Amakim Yatfu Var. The valleys will become covered with grain, which is the month of Adar. So l'cha'ira, you should learn from here that the time of pregnancy is the month of Adar. Why do they ignore this part of the pasuk? And for the Gemarah, of course they know that there are sheep that become pregnant in Adar, but according to them, Ahu b'char priyasa. That's the contrast of Aflasa. Aflasa means the latecomers, and Char priyasa means the early comers, those that are more rushed. Charpiyasa, b'mei charpi, yeah. B'mei charpi is the early days of my life. You'll often have the achronim will write, you'll see them in Chinuch, v'zeh kasafti b'mei charpi, or b'mei charpi hikshesi kushi atzuma. When I was young, I had a good question. You'll have often in the Chal Setshuvas, and especially by Achronim. That's Charpiyasa, the early ones, the early days. So those who come early, the Asyan May Adar, they already accept a male in the month of Adar, and therefore they become pregnant in Adar and give birth in Elul. But the majority, Tiny Rebbe Lazar and Reb Shimon, will become pregnant in Nisan, and therefore Lavshu Charim Hatzayin. In the time of Amakim Yatfu Var, which are the minority, Tishrei Af Yeshidu, which is the majority, and therefore they follow the majority, which are born in Elul, and therefore Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behem is not Rosh Chodesh Elul, but Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Okay, that's how Rabbi Yochanan understands the machlokes between the Tanoim. When is Rosh Hashanah L'Ma'aseh Behem? Now here we have a big question that Rabbi Avi asked, which is raised by the Rishonim. The Chidush Haran asks the question. He says, sheep are born after 5 months. That's true. But you have a behema gasa, you have a cow, pregnancy is usually approximately 9 months. So why are you establishing Rosh Hashanah L'Ma'aseh Behema based only on the sheep? What about cows? They also go into this category. When you say Rosh Hashanah L'Ma'aseh Behema, it means all Ma'aseh Behemas. In fact, the pasuk says first bakar and then soin. So why do the tzoyin get the upper hand to define when Rosh Hashanah is? Why don't we look when the baby calves of the cows are born? And that should be the Rosh Hashanah. Why are they ignoring the bakar which come before tzoyin?
Is there any specific time, any pasuk where it says when they get pregnant?
I'm sorry, what?
The Bahai Megasa? The Bahai Megasa, you have the pasuk where it says.
You got to figure it out. So you figure it out. You figure it out.
The cow is all yellow.
So let me give you two answers. One is the answer of the Chidush Haran, and then there's the answer that the Tosfos Yom Tov gives in Mishnayos. The Chidush Haran says a very interesting word. He says, when you look at the pasuk of Ma'aseh Behema, it's in the end of Parshas B'chukaisa, as you just quoted. The pasuk compares both of them in the same pasuk. The lashon is V'chol Ma'aser Bakar V'tzayin. How does it continue? Koil Hashayav Tachas Hashevet Ha'asiri Yiyah Kodesh Lashon. So Bakar and Tzayin are put together. B'meila, you have to learn from this that Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema should be for both of them at the same time, because the Torah compares both of them. Zok the Chidush Haran. Since the majority of behemoths, there are much more sheep that are born more than gasas, more dakas are born than gasas, more sheep than calf. So therefore, the zman to make Rosh Hashanah follows the majority, and once you're making that Rosh Hashanah, you're not making a new Rosh Hashanah for Bakar, because the Torah clearly puts them in the same pasuk under the same umbrella of Chamas Bakar V'Tzayin. K'vakara Sroya Edroi Mavir Tzayin Tachas Shifta. He doesn't say Mavir Bakar Bakar Tachas Shifta, because that's the majority. That's what the Chidush Haran says. The Shagas Aryeh in his commentary Turei Even on Masechta Rosh Hashanah, which was one of the most prominent mefarshim on Masechta Rosh Hashanah, the Turei Even by the Shagas Aryeh, he says that the reason behema daka is the majority is not only because more sheep are usually born than cows. He says because there are two types of behema daka that are chayev and meiser, and that is kvasim and izin, sheep and goat.
It's the same, no?
What?
Plus and these were the same.
Yeah, that's but he's saying since it's two types of species, when it comes to a behema gasa, there's only one min that's chayev and meiser, which is bakar, basically cows. Bulls, cows, and the baby cows, the baby of the cow, which can either be a male or a female calf, that is only one min. When it comes to behema daka, he says you have two minim, so therefore you follow that. Besides the fact that Torah Evan says that behemas dakas are born more in quantity more than behemoths. I think a sheep can give birth to always two, but I think up to four. No, could it be more than four?
I don't know. I'm saying almost 99% of the time it's two.
It's two, but sometimes it's up to four.
I've seen triplets though.
It's common. It's common, huh?
I have a different thing. Maybe one.
News
Sheep,
up.
you have to give birth in the spring, or in the summer and the spring. Usually in the spring you give birth to sheep. Cows give birth the whole year.
Right.
So sheep you try to time much more careful. Cows are bigger, stronger animals, so they don't mind if they give birth in the winter.
You're saying sheep usually have to give birth in the spring.
They do. That's usually sheep are always May, June. They're giving birth to sheep in May or June. Like in the Cheshire, always trying to give birth. Cows all year.
So you're saying that cows there's no time for birth. They do it all year, so therefore you can't make a Rosh Hashanah. Mashenk and sheep, you could make a Rosh Hashanah because there's a time. He's saying very interesting. He said sheep dafka give birth usually in the spring or in the summer because they need the warm weather. But cows are stronger, so they can give birth the whole year. They're less fragile. Very interesting. So you're saying that therefore, tzayin you could make a time. Once you're making a time for tzayin, we already put the bucker into that time. Because bucker, okay, very interesting.
What about the sheep in Florida?
The sheep in Florida. Well, I guess we're following Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, crocodile.
Huh? The Tosfos Yom Tov Tainus, I mean, first have to know the facts. He says the behemoths gases often are also born in the month of Av. It's just they become pregnant 4 months before the behemoths dakas. So usually the time is not that different. That's what the Tosfos Yom Tov says. But again, you have to know the Metzias. Okay. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan explains the machlokes based on this pasuk. Love shucharim atzayin amokim yatvu vor Yisrael af yeshiru. Do you focus on the amokim yatvu vor, which is other? Do you focus on the Yisrael af yeshiru, which is the month of Nisan? The Gemarah, however, rejects this. Zog the Gemarah, there's a big problem here. I understand how this works according to Reb Meir, who says that pregnancy is in the month of Adar. Kudiksiv, he follows the literal pshat of the pasuk. Love shucharim hatzayin. The sheep become pregnant when bisman shamakim yatvu var. When the valleys are bedecked with grain, which is an Adar. And then the pasuk says v'ikanami, and then you have the latecomers. You have the kratzers, you have the procrastinators. V'ikanami Yisrael after Shiru, which is in Nisan. So the order of the pasuk makes perfectly sense. According to them, the primary time is Nisan, that's the season. So then the order of the pasuk had to be Ipchat, to be in the opposite. Love Shucharim Atzayin, when? Bizman She'Yisrael af Yashiru, when the grain dances and sings, which is Nisan. V'ikanami, and then you have the early birds, Amakim Yatvu Var, who come around and have relations in Adar, and that's when they conceive and become pregnant. Why would the pasuk first pay tribute and discuss the time when the minority of the sheep become pregnant, not the majority? So therefore, it's very difficult to explain the pasuk this way. Ela Amar Rava. So Rava says, and of course, there's the obvious difficulty here, and that is, it seems also to be a machlokes like Pashat and Metzias. When the majority of sheep become pregnant. It's like, go check it out in the farm. I mean, you're teaching it in a pasuk, but go check it out. So Lepoil Rava rejects this perspective, and he gives a whole different interpretation. The Lekula Alma, everybody holds the same thing. Lof shucharim atzayin bezman shamalkam yatvu var. Yes, there are those who become pregnant in different seasons, but generally the time of Adar is a time of pregnancy, which is Adar. And nobody is arguing about that. Reb Meir agrees with that. Reb Elazar agrees, and Reb Shimon agrees. If so, we have our big problem, because then everybody should have said, if it's Adar, then birth is of, and Rosh Hashanah should be Rosh Chodesh Elul. V'hacha b'hai kraka mifligi. They're actually arguing about pshat in a pasuk, and it does not affect the time of pregnancy. That's not a machlokes, because we just explained amakim yatfu vor, that's the time. Yisrei ayu af yeshidu are the latecomers. There's a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh. We read this parsha in the Yamim Tovim. Starts off, Aser ta Aser, Eskol Tvua Zarecha, Hayoytze Hasada, Shana Shana. This is a very critical pasuk when it comes to Meiser. Aser ta Aser. You have to give Meiser. The word Meiser comes from the word Eser. Eser means 10. Meiser, of course, means 1/10. We call it in English tithing, which is Meiser. Aser ta Aser, you should give Meiser from what? Kol Tvuas Arecha, all the grain of your seed, Hayoytze Hasada, which comes out of the field, Shana Shana, year. What does year mean? It means year after year. From here we learn a big yesod. Meiser works in terms of years. I don't just say, okay, every 5 years, take a look, you have there a big pile of grain, a big pile of fruit, just give Meiser once in 2 years, once in 3 years. No. Shana Shana, you have to go year by year, and that's why we have to know when the year begins, when the year ends, because if not, I don't have a Shana Shana. What's Shana Shana? That's why it's so important to have Rosh Hashanahs for all these things. Now, this is not talking about Meiser Behema. This is talking about Tvua Zarech. This is talking about what we call Meiser Dagan, the Meiser we give from grain. So we're going to see soon when is Rosh Hashanah for Meiser Dagan. But what do we learn from here? It says Aser to Aser. Why does it say Aser to Aser? It had to say to Aser. It's called Tvua Zarecha. So as we already established many times, the yesod of Torah Shabbal Peh is that Moshe Rabbeinu's long shiurim are all written into the psukim. The reason is because he wanted that Jews should be able to do Chazaras Hashir. And Torah Shabbat is not before Torah Shabbal Peh, it's actually after Torah Shabbal Peh. Torah Shabbat is the record of the lectures of Moshe Rabbeinu Mepi Agvura, but it was written in the brilliant way that everything he said in the shir, he contains in the pasuk, sometimes with an extra word, sometimes with an extra letter, sometimes with a gematria. How do we know that Naziris is 30 days? Because he uses the word yiyah, and yiyah is the gematria 30, as the Gemarah says. But every vehicle will be used to explain and decide and convey his message. Aser to Aser, right away, gets our light bulbs going. There's a redundancy. What's Aser to Aser? To Aser, you should give Meiser. I know what Meiser is. Meiser means 1/10. So the Gemarah learns from here, Bishnei Meisres HaKosav Medaber. The pasuk was not talking about one Meiser, it was talking about 2 Meisres, even though it says only one. Echad Meiser Behema, V'echad Meiser Dagan. One is Meiser Behema, and one is Meiser Dagan. I have to look, what else do I give Meiser from? What else do you give Meiser from? We give Meiser from Behema in our Torah. So therefore, we compare Meiser Behema to Meiser Dagan. That's why he put it all in one pasuk, Aser to Aser. He wants us to use the halachas of Meiser Dagan, Meiser of grain, to define the halachas of Meiser Behema. Now the question is, what are we? Okay, so we compared them. Thank you. What am I supposed to do now? I compared them. What do I need a comparison for? Meiser Behema is a clear halacha. Meiser Dagan is a halacha. What's the comparison? Here there's a machlokes. Reb Meir says, Makish Meiser Behema LaMeiser Dagan. Makish means compare or juxtapose. You put together Meiser Behema with Meiser Dagan to teach Meiser Dagan Samuch Gemarah Yisurai. Just like when it comes to grain, Samuch Gemarah, in close proximity to when it gets finished, when it gets ripe and harvested and you finish the labor. That's when it becomes mechuyev in Meiser. That is the Rosh Hashanah from Meiser. In other words, Dagan becomes mechuyev in Meiser, Samuch Gemarah, which is basically when you bring it into the house after you finish all the malacha. So basically you harvest it, as we learned in the month of Nisan. Yisroi au af yashiru. That's when it's singing and dancing, and that's when you harvest it. Of course, you can harvest it later also. You can harvest the month of Iyar, the month of Sivan, and later. But the earliest harvest is usually Chodesh Ha'aviv, the month of Nisan. What do you do then? You do all the malachas that you have to do with the grain that we have in Hilchas Shabbos. Everything you have to do in order to prepare the grain, in order to have kernels, to be able to make flour, to be able to produce your foods, your breads, or you want to sell it. But that's not enough, because you leave it in the fields for the summer season in order for it to dry up and remove its moist. And then you bring it into the house. So the Gemarah Malacha is always at the end of the summer. It's going to rain soon, you bring it down to the house. That's why we established the Rosh Hashanah for it be'echad b'tishrei. Why? Because you finish the malacha and then you're mechuyev in meiser. Samuch liGemarah yisurei. When you finish the malacha, that's the time of meiser. So therefore, the Rosh Hashanah is be'echad b'tishrei. So therefore, we say af meiser behema samuch liGemarah yisurei. Meiser behema is going to have the same halacha. That's samuch liGemarah. The time when it becomes mechuyev in meiser, that's the time when isurei. When is the time to give Maisa? When is going to be the Rosh Hashanah for Maisa? What's Gemarah here? Gemarah here is birth. Birth. That's Gemarah. By Tvua, what is Gemarah? Gemarah is not harvesting. You still have a lot of malacha to do. And remember, Maisa is only mechuyev after Gemar malacha and you bring it into the house. So Samach li Gemarah, when it's all done, you give Maisa. That is going to be usually Echad B'Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah. So that's the time. That's the time we define. That's the time we define it. So Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is going to be Samach L'Gemarah. So usually somewhere in the month of Tishrei you bring it into the house. That's why Sukkot is called Chag HaAsif, right? So now my question is, when should start my Meiser Dagan? What should be the time? I say Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is a good time. I'm not going to do it Sukkot, that's the middle of a month. I do it Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. So anything that's now ready and came into the house after Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is part of a new year. If it came in before, it's part of the old year. Got it. That's fine. What about Maisa Behem? I say the same thing. Samach L'Gemarah Yisurei. When should you give Maisa? You should give Maisa after it's Gemar, after it's done, after its birth. That becomes its Rosh Hashanah. Since they're born in the month of Av, so therefore Be'echad Be'elul is Samach L'Gemarah. That's what Reb Meir times. Reb Elazar Reb Shimon say, Reb Elazar Reb Shimon say the same limud, but the opposite. Makish Maisa Behem or Maisa Dagan. What's the diff? What's the mahakish? Ma Maisa Dagan Rosh Hashanah Shalei B'Tishrei. Maisa Behem Rosh Hashanah Shalei Tishrei. Just like Maisa Dagan Rosh Hashanah is Tishrei, Maisa Behem is also Rosh Hashanah Tishrei. But what's the machlokes here? Reb Meir says you learn from Maisa Dagan and then you apply it to your own situation. Reb Elazar Reb Shimon says no, you learn from Maisa Dagan exactly what's by Maisa Dagan. Reb Meir says you learn from Meiser Dagan, but then you apply it to the way it works with your situation. You don't just copy Meiser Dagan. You learn a nekudah from Meiser Dagan that what? That the time of Rosh Hashanah is Samuch L'Gemarah, that's the Isurah, that's the time of Meiser, and then you apply it to Meiser Behema, and you make a different month. Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says, no, you compare it to Meiser Dagan, K'pshutai. It's just like Meiser Dagan. Meiser Dagan is Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, is also Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. So Rashi, Meiser Dagan, Samach L'Gemarah Yisurah. Rosh Hashanah L'Meiser says Tishrei, the Hachi Tana L'Kaman B'Braisa. We're soon going to see a Braisa Daf Yud Beis that Meiser Dagan is Rosh Hashanah L'Meiser says Tishrei. But Tishrei Samach L'Gemarah. Tishrei is very close to when it becomes completed. The Chol Yemais Hashanah, the Chol Yemais Hachama, a whole summer manicham. You leave them liyavish to dry up. Begranas Shabesadas, and granas are the silos, the storage places in the fields. So therefore, Samach L'Gemarah is when Rosh Hashanah Echad B'Tishrei, because Gemarah is right before, and that becomes the Rosh Hashanah L'Maisrus. So here too, what's Gemarah of the animals? Gemarah of the animals is the month of Av, right? Because we established they become pregnant in Adar, they're born in Av. So what's Samach L'Gemarah? It's going to be Rosh Chodesh Elul, that's Reb Meir. Where Reb Elazar Reb Shimon say, no, you want to compare it to Meiser Dagan? Kipshutai. Meiser Dagan is Echad B'Tishrei, it's also Echad B'Tishrei.
So Gemarah means, but that even the early, the late ones, everything is finishing by then, no? And by Behemoth, so why don't you give them extra month?
No, once you're making one Rosh Hashanah, you're not changing Rosh Hashanah. No. This is a Rosh Hashanah, this is a Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, but what are you saying? Some of the Gemarah outside Meir. You're saying that what? That you're finishing everything. You're finishing even the ones that started growing in Nisan or in Ear or whatever.
No, we're talking about Meiser Behema. Meiser Dagan, everybody agrees.
Saying, but what are you establishing by Meiser Dagan? What does it mean? Some of the Gemarah is when everything is done.
The malacha is done. Yeah, not the growth.
But all the malacha. So why don't you wait? If you're applying it to Meiser Behema now, wait till
because once it's born, there's no other malacha.
But there's other behemoths being born a month later. So wait till that whole season of behemoths is finished.
Right.
The season of behemoths being
no, but you can say that about grain also. There's grain that can grow later also. Right. We're talking about the majority of grain that you harvested in the time of harvest, you're done with. The fact that it could be grain later, yeah. But the grain that you harvested, you're done with. Chayra.
Practically speaking, it's much easier to have. Practically speaking, it's much easier to have a Tishrei when it comes to Elul.
Yeah. Why?
Because you have to separate the sheep for 1 month and a half. You're gonna go to Yerushalayim only for Shalosh Regalim. You're not gonna go in Elul. You're gonna go
Also, you can't separate sheep when they're a day old.
Right.
You gotta give them time. You gotta till they're done with the mother or whatever. Then you can't separate sheep.
No, so what's the problem? So you won't?
Or they're not separating because they're just marking them.
Yeah, what's the problem?
No,
You have time.
For a month and a half, he's gonna be gone.
No, but you have Baal Ta'achar, you have time.
I know he's
Yeah,
not.
Pesach, Shavuos,
It's very hard to separate them.
No, but you're not separating them.
You do. It's,
No, you
if
put
it's
a-
a month and a half, yes, you do.
But you separate, you just make a red mark on it, and that's it.
Okay, but the red mark don't stay for a month and a half
Why not?
because they play, they run, they.
But you're saying that today most sheep are born in May, in June, not in August. Here he says they're born in August, in
Too close
Av.
to the winter, August.
So you say today lamb are born in May.
Here, right?
On
Huh?
America.
In America. And that's just Israel, it's later?
They're born, but the Al Pi Roy, it's born like it says here.
In the month of
Al
Av.
Pi Roy, yeah, that's when it's born. But the auction, you'll see it.
August.
Not here.
Even in America?
Yeah, they're
August,
born.
really?
What? Oh, they're born, not born in August. They're born in Nadelgrad around.
In other words, early spring.
So,
Late
yeah.
winter, early spring.
Right, when you go there in the beginning
Early,
of the
early
summer,
spring.
the auction, all the babies are there. All the 2-month-olds.
They're born in June, in May, June.
Yeah.
So this is another effect of global warming?
No,
When the lamb are born, that everything got everything got
Well, today,
earlier?
Most of the things are not naturally. We're talking about natural. They do everything. You can have.
You say they manipulate the hormones.
Yeah. Well, cattle for sure is our insemination. Every single cattle.
Nothing is
born
natural.
Shemach is not natural.
We also have Swiss cheese
Huh?
regular in a month and a half.
I
We
hear
don't
you.
have 6 months anymore.
The dog
I hear you.
was a little bit rough to catch them, and with the
Salad fish is open.
I don't know if that's somebody that dug them tuna, but not.
Salmon also, all the salmon, most of the salmon eaters.
They're farms, right? They're not their own farms. Yeah, they come into.
Okay. Zog the Gemarah weiter. So now we established the machlokes, why they disagree about the Rosh Hashanah l'maisa behema. It's not about when they're born. It's about how we teach the lumdus of comparing it to Meiser Dagan. Do we mamish compare it to Meiser Dagan and we simply copy? It's like I do what you do, you're doing it Echad B'Tishrei, I do it Echad B'Tishrei, or we learn from Meiser Dagan a principle that then we apply to our own lives.
What was the Havana where Maya didn't say this? When he said his shit, he didn't say.
He didn't say why. He just said it's Echad Be'elul. Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon said you're wrong, it's Echad B'Tishrei.
Why should it?
So the Amirayim are struggling. Why'd they come up with these dates?
Nobody asked him why, and I mean, usually.
It wasn't recorded in the Mishnah. It could be somebody asked him, but in the Mishnah it wasn't recorded. So generations later,
Usually you have a machlok, you find one, but like change from one pussy to the other, from not to.
well, the first one didn't work. Rava says it's not. First one didn't work. So the Meir is looking not at the Meiser Dog and Kipshuta. He's looking at the Nekuda of it, the Oir Meir, the Oir of it, the Svara behind it. And the Svara he applies to Meiser Behema. He's not copying it Kipshuta. Rabbi Elazar and Reb Shimon are like much more literal. It's like Meiser Dog, it's like Meiser Dog, and it's Bechad B'Tish. Zog the Gemarah weiter. Be'echad B'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah l'Chadash. The first of Rosh Hashanah l'Shana. The first day of the month of Tishrei is a Rosh Hashanah for years. Now we go to the next part of the Mishnah. We're done with Echad B'Nissen. We're done with Echad Be'elul about Ma'aseh Behema. Now we go to the next shtickle of the Mishnah, which is the Rosh Hashanah that we're most familiar with. The Echad B'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah l'Shana. The first day of Tishrei is the Rosh Hashanah for years. Now what does this mean, the Rosh Hashanah for years? Does it mean Tavshin Ayin Zayin begins on the first day of Tishrei? Chavtes Elul is Tavshin Ayin Vav. Aleph Tishrei is Tavshin Ayin Zayin. That may be the pshat, but then the question is, why is that negay in halacha? Why is that important in halacha? Why do we have to make a Rosh Hashanah for this? And of course, the bigger question would be, why Tishrei? Again, we have no reason to use any month and say it's the beginning of a year. We have to remember the klal. What makes a year is an astronomical fact that after 365 and a half days, the solar orbit is completed. The sun, when we look at the sun is orbiting around the earth, or the earth is orbiting around the sun, it takes 365 and a half days until it reaches the original point and it starts to orbit again. So after 365 and a half days, you have a new year. But remember, you could start that year at any point. You could start that year whenever you want. It would be an artificial date. It's not like 8a-8b, the sun announces, now I'm starting over again. In a circle, at any point you could call this is the beginning, this is the end. So we always have to understand why certain dates are chosen. So we now discuss this 8a-8b, which became the classic Rosh Hashanah for the Jewish people, Ad HaYom Hazeh. When we call Rosh Hashanah, we don't mean Pesach, and we don't mean Rosh Chodesh Shvat. When we don't mean Rosh Chodesh Elul, we mean Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Zog the Gemarah Lamai Hilchasa. What do you mean Rosh Hashanah L'Shanim? Okay, a new year began. Thank you. For what? Not for Ma'aseh Behema, right? According to the Shittas of Meir. Not for Malachim. Not for the Golem. Not for Omer. Not for Mincha Chadasha. So the question is for what? Not for Ilonis. What's mean L'Shanim? For years. Okay, so we'll see. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa said Shtaris.
That was already established. Ktuvim Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah means it already was a Rosh Hashanah.
But it's not a halacha. That's for Dinei Shamayim. What you're saying is for heaven. Zog the Gemarah Amar Rav Papa L'Shtaris. This is negay for documents. What do we mean for documents? For documents. In the documents, we used to write, let's say I lend you money, so in the document you have to write the time of the loan. That's very important. Why is it so important to write the time of the loan? Because if there's a document, there's a lien on your property for me to collect. So when I want back my loan, I want my $100,000 that I lent you, and you don't have money, K'minig Yisrael, so I could take your property because there's a lien on your property. What happens, however, if you sold your property? My lien was there first because I lent you the money. I want it first. You can't just give it away your property before you paid up your debt. There's an outstanding balance here. What happens if you sold your property before I lent you the money? I can't go to the buyer and take away his property. Why? Because there was no lien on that property. It was sold. It already belonged to him before the loan. So here's the question. If I really lent you the money on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, but I write in the document that I lent you the money on Chanukah, and you sold your building on Purim, so I could come to your buyer and take away the building, and it's illegal. It's gneva. It doesn't belong to me because you sold it on Purim and you only borrowed the money Rosh Chodesh Nisan. But the document, Bezdin wouldn't know. That's why the date is so important. And we have a klal. Shtaris mukdamas psulin. Shtaris mucharin ksherin. They don't care if the date is later. If the date is later, fine. I was Michael. I lent you the money Rosh Chodesh Nisan. I tell you that I lent it to you Lag BaOmer. Okay. I was Michael you a month and a half. You get away with murder if you sell a building. That month, Gesundheit, I'm not going to be able to take it. They don't care if the lender is Michael. That's his right. He's very nice. But the other way around, it's Shaloi Kedin. It's illegal. I'm taking away from a buyer who's an innocent man. I'm taking away his house, and now he has to go to the original seller and take him to court, take him to Dentaira to get back the money that he paid him for a building that he couldn't keep. That would be unfair. That's already illegal. It's not he's a tzaddik. I can't be a tzaddik of Dain Cheshbon, right? The loiv also can be a tzaddik on the buyer's cheshbon. It's not fair. The loiv says, I don't care if he takes the building. Thank you. It's not yours. You already sold it to somebody. So therefore, such a star, the Chachamim disqualified, and they don't let the Malva even take the properties that he actually sold after the loan. In other words, the whole document becomes disqualified. It becomes like a milva al peh. Becomes like a verbal loan. So what does Rav Chizda say? Rav Papa say? Rav Papa is saying that they used to write the time of the loan. The time of the loan, the month, or the date, and the date. They also wrote the year from when... No, they wrote the year from when the king at the time became king.
Yeah, this was we said already.
So that's what we said earlier. So that's what the Gemarah is soon going to struggle with, because he's saying the same thing. So we used to use the year from when the king became the king. So the Mishnah says that Tishrei, that's when the new year begins. In other words, if the new king became a king, say the king's name was Trump, and he became a king on Chavtes Elul, and I lend you money on some Gedalia. I lend you $100,000 on some Gedalia. What do I say? It's the second year of His Majesty. He would love this. Maybe he's listening to the shir. It's the second year of His Majesty, right? The second year. He was only a king for 3 days, but it seems like he was a king for 9 years, the way he's acting. So anyway, see, Rosh Hashanah Echad B'Tishrei is considered a new year. Either guy was a king 1 day, that's 1 year. Yom Echad is a year. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the second year. L'maynaf Kemina, the year changes. Let's say he becomes a king last year, Rosh Hashanah, Gesundheit, then Rosh Hashanah is taking the second year. Let's say he becomes a king on Purim, okay. So he was a king for 6 months, and that's 1 year. So Rosh Hashanah is always the anniversary. Now you'll ask a question, why do you just make the anniversary when the anniversary is? If you became a king on Purim, so Purim will be the anniversary. The answer for that is that they didn't feel everybody will remember these dates because they're not that significant for the Jewish world, for the Jewish people. And therefore what's going to happen is there could be a tremendous confusion. What's the confusion? What's going to be the confusion? As Rashi explained in Daf Beis.
Forget about it. Some people forget their anniversaries and birthdays and things like that. So.
They say, what do you have to do to remember your wife's birthday? You forget it once. That's what you have to do. So let's see. Amar of Papa Zak l'shtaris. The Tanan, because we learned in our Mishnah, Masech Shviyis, Shtarei Chayv HaMukdamin. If you have Shtarei Chayv, if you have loan documents that are Mukdamin, meaning the time that's written on them is before the actual loan, Psulin. Those Shtaris are Psulin, they're disqualified, and the lender cannot take and collect his loan from the property that the borrower sold to somebody even after the loan. We treat it like a milval peh, like a verbal loan. This is a special knas that we give him. Why? Because he did something wrong by allowing the date to be before the loan, even by 1 day. But if you have a document where the date is late, after the time of the loan, ksheidin, it's kosher. Why? Because the lender is not making anybody lose money illegally by making the date late. He's not doing anything wrong by it. He's doing maybe something wrong for himself, but that's his choice. Gesundheit, you want to be a nice guy, gesundheit. Therefore, in order to be able to make this distinction between a shtar chayv mukdam and a shtar chayv mu'uchar, the Chachamim said, 8a-8b Tishrei, we need a cutoff time for the anniversary. Why? Because if every document would be written based on when that king actually became a king, so here we have a problem. I'm a Bezdin, and a document comes to me, and I see a document that was signed by witnesses, and the witnesses say, the loiva came to us and said, do me a favor, give me a document that I borrowed money from him and him. And the halacha is that you're allowed to do it even though the malva is not there and even though the loan is not happening, because the guy wants to say that he borrowed money, he needs the document. And the eidas say, we don't know if the date was before the loan or after the loan. But we do know that this loiva basically got money from this malva at another time from the date that's written in the shtar. In other words, we know that there was one halva, there was one loan, there were no two loans. Okay? So they say, we know that there was a loan, but we don't know if this date here is the loan that was, it's not the date that was written in the shtar. They wrote the shtar without seeing the halva. So if we don't know when the melech became a melech, so we're not going to know if this shtar is a shtar muktam or a shtar mu'uchar. Let's give an example that Rashi gives. If it says in the shtar, Kislev of the 3rd year of the king. Kislev of the 3rd year of the king. The eidas come and say,
They wrote which king?
Yeah.
They have the same name.
What?
All these kings have the same name.
Often they had the same name. I mean, that depended on the situation. Then they say the loan actually happened Tammuz of the 3rd year. The loan happened Tammuz of the 3rd year. Now, if the king became a king after Tammuz, before Kislev, if he became, so then what's the word? So then Kislev is before Tammuz. So the shtar is a shtar muktam. Why is the shtar a muktam? Because the date was Kislev, the 3rd year, and the loan was Tammuz. So it's a pasul shtar. But what if it was the other way around? What if the king became a king after Kislev, before Tammuz? Then, after Kislev, before Tammuz, then it's good. Then Tammuz precedes Kislev in the year of the king. So it's a shtar mu'uchar, it's kosher. So therefore, Bezdin won't know what to do. So therefore, they always made 8a-8b Tishrei should be the cutoff time. So therefore, you always know that what? If the date is Kislev and the loan was Tammuz, so is it a Shtar Muktim or Shtar Mocher? If the date is Kislev and the loan was Tammuz, it's a Shtar Muktim or Shtar Mocher? Shtar Muktim, because Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim is when? The 8a-8b for Shtaris, not Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim. The 8a-8b is the Shtaris, and therefore it's going to be a Shtar Muktim. So the Gemarah, let's just see, V'hatnan be'echad b'nissen Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim. I don't understand you. A line earlier you said it's echad b'nissen. V'amrin, and we asked in Daf Beis l'may hilchasa what's negeya. V'amr b'chizda l'shtaris. You just said the same whole Torah. You said on echad b'nissen. And for the Gemarah loy kasha, kan malchi Yisrael, kan malchi u'masayla. When we said Rosh Hashanah l'shtaris is the first day of Nisan, it's talking about Jewish kings. Here, when we're saying echad b'tish is Rosh Hashanah for years, negeya for your documents, it's talking about non-Jewish kings. It's two different types of kings. Zog the Gemarah, Allah da Amr Reb Chizda said on Daf Gimel already. Lo yishanu ela l'malchi Yisrael v'l'malchi u'masayla Tishrei min Tishrei manina. Reb Chizda mas Nisan asa lashmina. Reb Chizda Daf Gimel said that when it says be'echad b'nisan is Rosh Hashanah, it's only for non-Jewish kings, for Jewish kings. But for non-Jewish kings, be'echad b'tishrei, it's a befedish Mishnah according to you. I need Reb Chizda and Amayra to tell me what the Mishnah is going to say the next line. That be'echad b'tishrei is Rosh Hashanah for Shanim, which means for non-Jewish kings. Zog the Gemarah lo. Reb Chizda is not telling you the din. The din I know from the Mishnah. Reb Chizda kroi asa lashmina. Reb Chizda comes and teaches us how the Mishnah knows it. You remember the Gemarah, Reb Chizda there goes into all of the details in discussing the psukim about Persian history, about Nehemiah, showing that there's a distinction between how they counted the non-Jewish kings' anniversaries to the Jewish kings' anniversaries. So Reb Chizda is not telling you the halacha, he's just saying the halacha as a prelude to explain the reason, the sources of the halacha from the psukim. But the halacha itself we know from the Mishnah. But the question is, how did the Mishnah make this distinction? Why would Chazal make this distinction? So the Chizda is explained to you from the Psukim that there's a difference between Malchi Yisrael and Malchi Masaylam, but the Vart is the same Vart. It's a Rosh Hashanah for the anniversary of the king that is relevant for documents. For non-Jewish kings, it's going to be the first day of Tishrei. That is going to be considered the new year of the anniversary. For Jewish kings, it's going to be the Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and that's what we call Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim. We recognize the Jewish kings as kings. It's interesting. For the non-Jewish kings, we'll call it Shanim, and for the Jewish kings, we'll call it Melachim. Because the real Malchus we want to attribute to the Jewish kings. So over there, we'll call it Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim, and for the non-Jewish kings, we'll call it Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim, Rosh Hashanah for years. This is the first perspective of Reb Chizda. The Gemarah is going to go on to give different perspectives of why this is a Rosh Hashanah, not connected necessarily to the non-Jewish kings.
What is the reason is to reduce confusion?
7 lines from the bottom, Ches Amud Aleph. This line starts La'ashme'ina, the second La'ashme'ina, by the words 8a-8b. So the Gemarah is now addressing the next part of the Mishnah that taught us that the first day of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim. It's Rosh Hashanah for years. And the question is, okay, so we start counting our years from Echad b'Tishrei, which is what we do. Our years, we start counting on the first day of Tishrei. The question is, Lamai Hilchasa. What are the halachic ramifications? In other words, why is that really relevant? So, the first answer was presented by Rav Papa. And Rav Papa says it's extremely relevant for documents. L'shtaris has explained at length. And what we are referring here to is not counting of the years since the creation of the world, but counting of the years of the anniversary of the king who was reigning at the time. And every Echad b'Tishrei is counted as a new year, regardless which day in the year he was actually coronated and when he assumed his throne. On this, the Gemarah wondered. We just said earlier that is designated for the first day of Nisan, Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim. So Reb Chizda explained that there were two types of kings. There were Jewish kings and there were non-Jewish kings. The Jewish kings, their anniversary is celebrated on the first day of Nisan. Nisan is, so to speak, the Jewish month. Nisan is the month of Yitzias Mitzrayim. Nisan is the month when Jews, this is the Chidush Haran explains, the Jews became an independent people and therefore they can have their own king. They're not under Paro's dictatorship anymore. In other words, Nisan is the Jewish celebration of independence, the celebration when Jews become a nation, so therefore that's when Jewish kings celebrate their anniversary. Tishrei, on the other hand, is considered the universal month, it reflects all of humanity, right? Especially if you're going to believe, we're going to discuss that machlokes a little later in the Gemarah. If the world was created in Tishrei or in Nisan, but if it was created in Tishrei, so then Adam Arishan was created on Echad b'Tishrei, Adam and Chava. Adam and Chava are the fathers, Adam and Chava are the parents of all of humanity, the Jewish people as well, but all of humanity. So really, every person is connected to Adam and Chava. He is the father of every single human being. It's not the Jewish unique month. So Reb Chizda says, this is just the explanation, l'chayre, that Tishrei, Echad b'Tishrei, Shoshana l'Shanim is what? Which year? The year of the non-Jewish king. That was the explanation that I said Reb Papa, I said Reb Chizda, this is Reb Chizda's explanation. If so, why does the Gemarah quote it earlier in the name of Reb Chizda when really it's a clear Mishnah? Rosh Hashanah al-Malachim, Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim. And Reb Chizda told it to us as a Chiddush earlier on Daf Gimel, that when it says Rosh Hashanah al-Malachim, it's only for Jewish kings, but not for non-Jewish kings. He should have just said the Mishnah says it a line later. And this the Gemarah answers, Eina Chanami. The sources in the Mishnah of Chizda was just explaining how the Mishnah knew it. In other words, why we would differentiate and what are the sources, and for this he gave us the psukim of Tanakh that we learned earlier in Daf Gimel to establish this truth. So this is where the answer is holding at the moment, that it's both Rosh Hashanah and Malachim. This is called Malachim, this is called Shanim, this is called for Jewish kings, and this is for non-Jewish kings. So the Gemarah weiter, v'Iba Yisem. Iba Yisem means if you want, Ema, say. That's why whenever the Gemarah gives an alternative, a second answer, it's usually v'Iba Yisem, which means if, bayis you want, Ema, say. In other words, if you wish, there's another answer. What is the second answer? Reb Chizda Reb Zayda Masnil. Reb Chizda, who said earlier in the Gemarah that Gentile kings count their anniversary from the first day of Tishrei, he actually holds that when it says in the Mishnah that Echad b'Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim, it's not referring to the years of the king, which would of course make it a little more geschmack, because then it's not a repetition of Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim, it's just different kings. Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim would actually be a new thing that doesn't exist before. According to Rav Papa's interpretation, both are Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim. It's just one is for Jewish kings, one is for non-Jewish kings. So you differentiate it by using the word Malachim and using the word Shana. So the Gemarah says, no, it's possible that Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim actually means something completely different, as we will see. And therefore, when Reb Chizda said on Daf Gimel that for Malchi Umas Ha'olam you count from Tishrei, it was a Chiddush. It wasn't something that says in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about something else. What would then be the interpretation of Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim? He says like Reb Zayda. Reb Chizda holds like Reb Zayda, and therefore he says that for Malchi Umas Ha'olam you have a different Rosh Hashanah because he doesn't have that source in the Mishnah. Not like we explained before in Rev Papa. What's Reb Zayda Masnala? The Reb Zayda said when the Mishnah says that the first day of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim, the Mishnah is talking about l'tkufa. It's talking about what we call the tkufa, which means the change of season. We'll explain in a moment. Because Reb Zayda said that our Mishnah follows Rabbi Eliezer, the Omar, who says, and this is going to be the discussion on Daf Yud, b'Tishrei nivra ha'olam, that the world was created on Tishrei, versus Rabbi Yeshua, who believes that the world was created in the month of Nisan. And therefore, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that the world was created in Tishrei, so therefore the first kufa of creation is not the tkufa of Nisan, it's the tkufa of Tishrei. So therefore, when you say Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim, that's what you're saying, it's the Rosh Hashanah for years, meaning the first kufa is not Tkufas Nisan, if first Kufa is Tkufas Tishrei, because this is following the shit of Rabbi Eliezer, that B'Tishrei Nivra Ha'il.
Will make a difference when the Tkufa is there a difference now?
That's a wonderful question. You can ask on this. Also, L'mai Hilchasa. Same question we asked before. Fine. So we know that this is the first Kufa when the world was created, because B'Tishrei Nivra Ha'il. L'mai Hilchasa. That's a very good question. So briefly, when we say L'tkufa, what are we referring to? We know that there are 4 seasons in the year. Generally, the tropical year, in other words, the solar year, we have 4 seasons. What we call spring, and you have summer, and then you have and you have the autumn, and then you have the winter, the cold months. So when we see in Rashi, take a look. V'i boisem. Reb Chizda, the itzerich lashmeinon, keda'amon the malchi umis betishrei. Reb Chizda had to tell us that the Rosh Hashanah for Gentile kings is Tishrei. Leslie hadid of Papa, the Parish Rosh Hashanah l'shanim the hachal l'shtaris. He actually disagrees with Rav Papa, who says Rosh Hashanah l'shanim means l'shtaris. Elekrebzeda masnila, lepirusha de l'shanim de masnisa. When he's looking for an interpretation of shanim, he chooses Reb Zeda, not Rav Papa. The Reb Zeda masni Rosh Hashanah l'shanim means l'tkufas chamo levanda, meaning loymar shemoin in libri yason v'iluchon shel tkufas hachama u'moildas halavana mitishrei. The way we count the year is based on the creation and the movements of the tkufa of the chama and the births of the levana. We always started from Tishrei, not from Nisan. On Dafya. So we have these 4 seasons, and they're known as tkufas Nisan. This is when spring begins. Then you have what's known as tkufas Sivan, when summer begins. Then you have tkufas Tishrei, that's the end of the summer, autumn begins. And then you have tkufas Tevis. This is winter begins. I'm sorry, Tammuz, yeah. Each tkufa is approximately 3 months, around 91 days. So therefore, if you start with Tishrei, so you'll have Tishrei, Cheshvan, and Kislev, and then you'll have tkufas Tevis. Then you'll have Tevis, Shvat, Adar, and you'll have tkufas Nisan. You'll have Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, and you'll have tkufas Tammuz. In English, tkufas Nisan, they call it today the equinox. And it's basically, it's marked, we know that we see the tkufas immediately, because one tkufas Nisan and tkufas Tishrei, will be the days when those days in the year, 2 days out of the year, when the day and the night will be equal. Usually it's either a longer day, a shorter night, or a longer night and a shorter day. But those 2 days when the sun is parallel with the equator, according to the orbit, so those are unique 2 days. That begins tkufas Nisan, and then tkufas Tishrei. Then you'll have tkufas tkufas Tammuz. That day will be the longest day of the year, and the shortest night of the year. And then you'll have tkufas Tevis, and you'll have the exact opposite. The shortest day of the year and the longest night of the year.
What's the translation of tkufa?
Oh, so the question is, what does the word mean? What the word means? So the Rishonim say that it's connected to the word hakafa, like hekef, tkufa.
In English, what's the translation?
Equinox. Equinox. That's kufas Nisan. So and basically these are the beginning of the seasons. So each tkufa is approximately 90 days or 91 days actually. There's a machlokes exactly how you measure the tkufas, which we're going to get to. No. It generally is not counted in the Hebrew months because remember, our Hebrew months follow the moon, and the tkufas are based on the sun, not the moon. So therefore, the tkufas are usually in the days of the secular calendar. It's 21st. It's the 21st. So you have the 21st of March. Around approximately 21st of March is Tkufas Nisan. Then you have Tkufas Tammuz is the 21st of June. Then you'll have Tkufas Tishrei will be September. September's 21st. And then you'll have Tkufas Tevis is usually around December 21st or sometimes December 23rd.
Yeah, depends.
Right, around December 23rd, that's going to be Tkufas Tevis. Those are the Tkufas. Now the question is, when did the Tkufas begin? If the world was created in the month of Nisan, so the Rebbeinu Shalom set up the system that history should begin with the season of Nisan. So on the Wednesday, it says in Chumash, that on Wednesday Hashem said, Yehi Ma'oris, B'Rikiya Hashemayim, the Wednesday of creation. So the Ma'oris, the luminaries, which are the sun and the moon, start functioning. So then they start functioning as the Tkufa of Nisan. Tkufa comes from the word hekef, which means orbit, like hakafa, right? Make hakafas.
He created Zman at that time.
Time as well, right?
There was no Zman.
Right. So the creation of the time and of the functioning of the galaxies was related to what happens every single year in the Tkufa of Nisan, and that's how it begins. Or if you say, according to Rabbi, that's the shit of Rabbi Yeshua, which is going to be discussed in Daf Yud at length. Or the shit of Rabbi Lezer is B'Tishrei Nivra Ha'olam. If so, the first tkufa would be Tkufas Tishrei. So when the Ma'oris, the luminaries, were hung up, so to speak, in the heaven, and the hekef begins. Each tkufa represents a certain hekef, a certain end in the orbit. It's not the complete orbit. The complete orbit ends after 365 days. It's a point in the orbit that completes a certain hekef. That's why they call it tkufa. And there are 4 such points which basically are responsible for the different types of seasons during the year. It's very, very cold, or it's very, very hot, or it's beautiful or nice weather. That depends on the relationship between the position of the sun and the earth, and each tkufa represents a different position in that relationship, hence the different tropical seasons of Nisan, Tammuz, Tishrei, and Teves. So as a result of this, if you say that the world was created in Tishrei, and therefore the tkufas begin with Tkufas Tishrei, that would mean that Tishrei is the first season by which you count. Now you'll say, Lamai Hilchasa, Lamai Nafkamina. Why is this so negeya? So if you'll just look, the first opening words of Tosfos, we're still, Be'ezer Hashem, going to get back to the Tosfos. This is a long, complicated Tosfos that has to do with the cheshbonos of Tishrei and Nisan. But I want to introduce you to...
When he says, Tishrei,
Yeah.
isn't that what he's telling you? This is when you're going to start calculating. You have to know when to calculate from.
You have to start calculating...
From a point.
From a point, right.
So that's
from creation. That would be one difference. When you start calculating your moiled. Tosfos says, look at Tosfos, he sums it up. He says, Umaynin moiled halavana, v'hatkufa me'echad b'tishrei. 2 things. And these 2 things you see in Rashi. Number 1, you start counting the birth of the new moon, which means the first Rosh Chodesh, so to speak. What is called moiled halavana? When do you count it? Not from echad b'nisan, but from echad b'tishrei. And the same is true with the tkufa. So this is both negeya to the sun, which is responsible for the tkufas for the tropical seasons, and for the moon for the moila. That's why Rashi says, "Moinin libriyasan vehiluchan shel tkufas achama u'moldas halavana mitishrei."
They can have different dates if you
But
start doing...
One second. No, you're right. No. He's just saying 2 separate things.
If indeed the first petition and first edition should be mailed in the the creation of man,
Be'echad b'tishrei, yeah. Like Rabbi Lezer.
so the timings will off.
It's Wednesday.
Ideally, Tishrei first is when the Lebanon gets created. But that's
2 days before.
That's good. Man's created on Friday. The whole world would
No, you're right. You're right. So we can take that into consideration, 100%. Yeah. So Tosfos says, Rabbi Yeshua moina min Nisan. Rabbi Yeshua would say Nisan. Now you may say, who cares? Tosfos says, v'yesh nafkusa merube bedavar. This is very important. There's a big nafka in it. Nafkusa means there's a lot of ramifications there. But mesha koydem minyan shel zeh, la minyan shel zeh chatzi shana. The fact that this minyan is a half a year before this one, because Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is a half a year before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, yesh nafkusa merube bedavar. There is a very important result of this, and that's why it's negeya l'may hilchos. What is the difference? So the Tosfos just says v'yesh nafkusa bedavar, and you got to figure it out. And then he goes off to a whole other subject about Nisan and Tishrei, which needs more introductions. B'li ned the Be'ezer Hashem will get back to this Tosfos because it's a big central side is the Tosfos in Rosh Hashanah. But the Pnei Yeshua here in Tosfos explains that what Tosfos probably means here, that there's such an nafkusa b'davar is, generally we have a din, and this is a very important din because it's the Yesodus of Ibra Hashanah, that when it says Shomer es Chodesh ha'aviv, we have to make sure that Chodesh ha'aviv, that Nisan is in the month of spring. Pesach is celebrated in the month of spring. First of all, it has practical ramifications, because on Pesach you had to bring a carbon omer. So you had to have ready, ripe barley. If you're still in winter season, you're not going to have your barley, you can't bring a carbon omer, you don't have your sfiras omer, you're being mevatel the mitzvah sesei, you're affecting shvuas. I mean,
Shavuos has to be chita also.
on shvuas you need chita, but you have another 2 months for that. Yeah. But yes, you must have a carbon. So practically speaking, you need to make sure that your Pesach is not happening Chanukah time. That's number 1. Number 2, the Torah clearly says Shamar es Chodesh Aviv, and you need a shmirah. Why do you need a shmirah for it? Whenever it says shmirah, it means you have to guard it, because if not, the Ganav is going to run away. And the reason is because Pesach is going to run away, Taka. Pesach is going to run away because Pesach is based on the lunar month, as we explained. and the lunar month is 11 months shorter than the lunar year is 11 months shorter than the solar year, and therefore every single year you're going to have a bigger and larger discrepancy, as they have in the Muslim calendar when it comes to Ramadan. So therefore, Shomer is Chodesh Aviv, you have to guard Chodesh Aviv. How do you guard Chodesh Aviv? Basically every few years you have to give our lunar year an extra 30 days, and that way it catches up and we don't have a discrepancy between the seasons, which are based on the sun, and the Yom Tovim, which are based on the moon. If this is the case, Chazal had to make sure, the Sanhedrin had to make sure, that Tesvav Nisan was always after Tkufas Nisan. Tkufas Nisan had to begin before Tesvav Nisan. In other words, before Pesach comes in, you already have the Tkufa, the era, the orbit of Nisan, which basically is the introduction of spring. So that the Karban Pesach and Pesach, the Yom Tov Pesach is being done in Chodesh Aviv. If they saw that Tkufas Nisan falls out after Tesvav Nisan, in other words, Pesach, our Pesach, the 15th day of Nisan is starting before Tkufas Nisan. Remember, Tesvav Nisan is based on the moon. Tkufas Nisan, what we call Tkufas Nisan, is based on the sun. So if they saw that Tesvav Nisan is starting before Tkufas Nisan, so your Pesach is starting before spring, this was the reason to create Ibur Hashanah, to add another month, to add an extra other. So of course, even if Tkufas Nisan would start Yud Zayin Nisan, it's not a problem because it's going to start Yud Zayin Adar Sheni, or Chaf Adar Sheni, or Chafei Adar Sheni, and by the time Pesach comes, you're perfectly in Tkufas Nisan. If this is the case, we have to understand when the Tkufas began. Why? Because generally speaking, as the Pnei Yeshua says from the Gemarah, generally speaking, because I say generally because there's a big machlekes between Reb Shmuel and Reb Ada, how you counted Kufas, and it basically has to do with when the orbit of the sun is completed every year. But generally speaking, we're talking about the separation, the time of every Tkufa is 91 days and 7.5 hours. 91 days and 7.5 hours, which is approximately 3 months, right? If a month is 30 days, so 30, 60, 90, approximately a little more than 3 months. 91 days fits in perfectly to weeks. 91 days is 13 weeks exact, right? 91 has 13 weeks. So therefore, if between one Tkuf and another Tkuf is 91 days, essentially, it's the same day. The Tkufa, the next Tkufa is going to be the same. The Tkufa now is going to be the same day of the week, but it's going to be 7.5 hours off. 7.5 hours later, because the separation is 91 days and 7.5 hours. So if this is the case, if you're skipping 2 Tkufas, if you're going from Tkufas Tishrei to Tkufas Nisan, so you have 91 days twice and 7.5 hours twice, so the difference is going to be 15 hours. That's going to be the difference. 15 hours. So here, the Pnei Yeshua says, this is what Tosfos means, that there's a major difference if you start your Tkufas with Tishrei, or if you start your Tkufas with Nisan. Because if you start your Tkufa with Nisan, so then Tkufas Tishrei is going to be 15 hours later. You start Tkufas Tishrei, so Tkufas Nisan is going to be 15 hours later. So sometimes the Sanhedrin could look at Tesvav Nisan and Tkufas Nisan, right? And if you started with Tkufas Tishrei, so then they're going to say, you have enough time. Or the other way, they may say you not have enough time. In other words, this difference of 15 hours could be the question if Tesvav Nisan started after Tkufas Nisan, and then you need an extra month for Ibur Hashanah, or Tesvav Nisan started before Tkufas Nisan. And that depends when Tkufas Nisan is. So if Tkufas Nisan, you understand, if Tkufas Nisan was the first, so Tkufas Tishrei is going to be later. If Tkufas Tishrei is the first, then Tkufas Nisan is going to be 15 hours later. If Tkufas Nisan is going to be 15 hours later, so let's say Tkufas Nisan starts, right, 14 hours after Pesach begins. Or whatever, after Tesvav Nisan, a few hours. Do you make an Ibur Hashanah? Don't you make an Ibur Hashanah? You have to make an Ibur Hashanah, because Tesvav Nisan has to be after Tkufas Nisan. This would be a major chiluk if you count like Rebbe Lazar or you count like Rebbe Yeshua when it comes to Tkufas.
How come we have Pesach in May these years?
Is the Chavada good? May is fine. Remember, the Tkufas starts in April.
My
April 21.
In March.
March 21.
I mean March 21. That's fine. You're good. The end of March, you're good.
We want to make sure we don't have Purim before then.
The end of March, you're good. That's spring. That's going to be the day, the time when the day and the night will be equal. Basically, 6 o'clock a.m. to 6 o'clock p.m. Yeah.
Why couldn't they make
The American calendar, which is based on the Roman calendar, is completely based on the sun. They don't need it. They don't work with it. You don't need the moon for it. They don't need, the moon makes it complicated because it's a different mahalach. The Muslims follow only the moon. The Romans and today's calendar here in America follows only the sun. Okay, you have your problems. They have different issues that come up, but it's basically you're dealing only with one orbit. In the Jewish calendar, you're synchronizing two different orbits that don't work together. They're not supposed to work together. But we need them to work together because our months have to follow the moon. It says, HaChodesh Hazeh Lechem, Rosh Chadashim. Our Chadashim follow the Chidush HaLevana. We need to take into consideration the moon. We don't have any other months. We don't make months based on the sun. We don't take the solar year and split it into 12 parts. We don't do that. We look at the moon and we follow the orbit of the moon, and that's when we make our Rosh Chodesh. So our Pesach has to follow the moon. We don't have another Pesach. That's our Tesvavnis. On the other hand, it has to be Chodesh Aviv, so this is where you need the synchronization.
So they don't work together. It's just we're in the middle, so...
L'gabayas. L'gabayas.
According to the Muslims in the Middle East, because they couldn't figure out, week or something that they put in the least to make a difference. So, yeah.
Somebody once said that Israel is a wonderful country, it's just in a bad neighborhood.
According to their calendar, there's also a problem with the hours, so it was every 100 years it moves
Yes.
away.
Yeah. We're going to learn that you have the two big calendars, the Julian calendar by Julius Caesar, and then the Gregorian calendar that was changed by the Pope in order to make it more adjustable. We'll see, it becomes very negayat our cheshbonos. Yes, always, yeah.
How, if it's only a 15-hour difference, what
You're
would be
right.
the difference between a Lamed Oder? Would it ever play into that? You know, if it's going to be a Lamed Oder.
Right, so that you can make either 29 days or 30 days. That the Sanhedrin could make.
They can be kaveh.
Yeah. That they can make 29 or 30.
Again, and we wouldn't go back into what we said before that people wouldn't know.
Oh, so that's why we say don't make it before Rosh Hashanah. We said the Ibur year should not be made before Rosh Hashanah. It should be made as close as possible so that every Jew in Chutz La'aretz should know about it. That we learned before.
Should have made it.
Lamed only b'di'evet. Lamed Adar you can only make b'di'evet. If they did it, it's mekudesh.
We're talking about 15 hours over here, so if they did it...
No. They have to do the Ibur before Lamed Adar, but they see that the Tkuf... Remember, you could calculate the Tkuf much before.
So they make this...
Yeah. The calculation they made before. Zog the Gemarah weiter. So Rosh Hashanah L'Shana means the new year begins. What's pshat? The new year begins? That we look at the creation of the world in Tishrei, and therefore, when we look at Kufas, we say, what's the first Kufa? The first Kufa is Tishrei, not Nis. Or what's the first Mailid? The first Mailid is the Levana of Tishrei, not Nis.
According to Rabbi.
Huh?
According to Rabbi.
According to Rebbe Lezer, and our Mishnah, Rebbe Zayda says, follows Rebbe Lezer. That's what Rosh Hashanah. Reb Nachum by Yitzchak Amar. Reb Nachum by Yitzchak says, it's a whole different word. Echa b'Tishrei Hashanah has nothing to do with Kufas and nothing to do with Shtaris. L'din, it has to do with din, with judgment. What's the din? We today in the Jewish world, everybody knows Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Yemei Hadin, but it doesn't say anywhere in Chumash such a thing. Nor does it say the word Yom Hadin even brought in Chumash. Nor does the Chumash even bring the word Rosh Hashanah. Right? The name Rosh Hashanah you don't have in Chumash. In Chumash it says that on the 7th month, on the first day, it should be Yom Trua Yiyalecha. So the whole thing about Rosh Hashanah is not stated explicitly in Chumash. So when Rachman says that Rosh Hashanah L'Shana means that it's a din, it's the day that the year is judged, the whole year is judged on this day, he has to bring a source for this. What does this say? The Ksiv, there's a pasuk in Parshas Eikev. Moshe Rabbeinu is praising and extolling the virtues of Eretz Yisrael. And he says the famous pasuk, Eretz asher Hashem Elokecha doirish oisa. Tamid einei Hashem Elokecha ba mereishis hashana va'ad achris shana. It's the land that Hashem, the eyes of Hashem are on this land from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. So the Chachamim explained this pasuk. What does it mean his eyes are there from the beginning of the year till the end of the year? Could have said his eyes are there always. If it's from the beginning of the year till the end of the year, so then it's always, right? So they'll say, Ein Hashem Elokecha Batamid. So the Chazal Taich, Meireshis Hashanah Nidoin, Ma Yehei B'Soifa. That basically, Meireshis Hashanah V'Adachris Shana. From the beginning of every year, he judges what is going to happen for this year till the end of the year. Every year has its own cheshbon, its own unique energy, its own unique opportunities, its own unique mission, its own unique challenges, its own unique virtues. So that's why there's a separation with Reish Hashanah. When is that Reish Hashanah? When is this beginning of the year again? We could make the beginning of the year whenever we want. It could be Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, it could be Rosh Chodesh Tevis. Was epis Rosh Chodesh Tishrei? This is the beginning of the year. Zag the Gemarah, Meimai Tishrei. How do you know it's Tishrei? It says Reish Hashanah. So you're telling me Pshat is that there's one day in the beginning of the year that the Rebbeinu Shalom judges and decides what's going to happen for the entire year from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. Ad Achir Shana. So the question is, how do you know it's Tishrei? Zag the Gemarah, the Ksiv. Let's just see Rashi, the Ksiv, Eine Hashem, Reb Nachum Yitzchak Amar. Zag Rashi, Rosh Hashanah l'shanim the Tanan Hacha, l'din Tana. It's talking about judgment. Shakadosh Baruch Hu don b'Tishrei es kol boy olam. He judges everyone in the world. Kol boy olam means not only Jews, every single person who's a citizen of the world. Kol ha-koiris oisam, everything that's going to happen with them, ad Tishrei abot till the next Tishrei. The Ksiv, Eine Hashem alakecha b'meireshis Hashanah, ha-nigzarois leha. How do you know it's Tishrei? Zog the Gemarah Diksiv, because there's a pasuk in Tehillim, Peirik Pei Aleph, Kapitel Pei Aleph, and it's actually the Shir Shel Yom of Thursday. Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'kesa leyom chagenu ki choik li Yisrael hu mishpat l'lekeyak. It's a very interesting pasuk. Let's translate the pasuk. Tiku b'chodesh shofar. You should blow in the month shofar. It doesn't say which month. It just says blow shofar in the month. Tiku b'chodesh shofar. B'kesa liyom chagenu. What does bakesa liyom chagenu mean? So literally the Mefarshim say bakesa, Rashi brings in Tehillim, means a designated time. Tiku b'chodesh shofar, you should blow shofar b'chodesh. Bakesa liyom chagenu, in the designated time for the day of our holiday. The Gemarah here is going to teach bakesa from the word kisui, which means a cover up, like michsa, lechasis, eclipsed. So he says like this, what's tiku b'chodesh shofar b'kesa lagenu? What do you mean blow shofar during a month? A whole month you blow shofar? Which month? So we see here, tiku b'chodesh shofar means you have to blow shofar when b'chodesh. B'kesa liyom chagenu. Ezo chag, which is a holiday shachodesh miskasa boy, that the chodesh is covered up during that holiday. And generally when we say here chodesh, we don't mean chodesh as we say chodesh, which means a month. The reason we call Chodesh a month is because it comes from the word Chadash, which means new, like the word Chidush. Why do we call a month new? The answer is because a month is based on the fact that there's a new moon. So the whole month is called Chodesh only because it comes from the Chidush HaLavana. Unlike, of course, the lunar cycle, unlike the solar cycle, the lunar cycle is one, that during the month, the moon goes through a complete orbit around the earth. And as we know, the system is that there are different stages in the moon, what we call the waxing and waning of the moon. And generally, the moon makes this orbit around the earth. So when the moon actually is in a position where it's between the earth and the sun, so the moon is facing the sun, we can only see a half of the moon, the half a ball that we can see, 180 degrees of the ball of the moon. When the moon is facing the sun and actually absorbing all of its light, but it's parallel, it's in between the earth. If this is the earth, and then you have here the moon, and then you have the sun on top of it, and the moon is facing the sun, so the moon is absorbing all the light, and we see absolutely nothing. That is the moment of the new moon, so to speak. When the moon starts moving away a little bit, so then you see the thin sliver, the crescent of the moon. And then as it moves further away, you see more of the sliver, more of the crescent. It waxes and it grows until the moon goes the other side, and now the moon is on the other side, and the earth is between the sun and the moon, and now the half of the moon that we see perfectly as it's reflecting the light of the sun and it's showing it shows us that light, and then the moon starts getting closer to the sun as it's completing its orbit, and here again it wanes and becomes smaller and smaller until it goes back to that position between the earth and the sun, where again it's going to be completely eclipsed. That moment is called Rosh Chodesh, but we cannot celebrate that moment yet because we don't see anything. When the witnesses see the moon already moved out a little bit, so now they could see the new moon, which is always a tiny little sliver, and then they can come to Bezdin, and Bezdin will make it Rosh Chodesh. So that's the moment of the moilud, of the birth of the new moon, and that's what we mean by Chodesh. It's a new moon. Why is it called a new moon? Because it's, so to speak, reborn. Of course, Lagabi, the moon itself, the moon is always there, the moon didn't disappear. But from our vantage point, you say the moon disappeared, it was gone, it was, so to speak, dead, and it has Tchiyas HaMesim. It's rebirth. This is called moilud alavona. Shehei masidim lihischadesh kemoisam.
Short question on that subject. Why on the 15th we see it bigger when actually it should be blocked by the earth?
Because the earth can't block the position of the earth, the view of the moon reflecting the sun. It's just we get to see it because of our position. So actually we see the light most when it's the most distant from its source.
But are we not in the middle of it? We are standing in the middle.
It's so small compared to the sun.
Lagabi, the sun's light, it doesn't block.
The light
The
comes
size
around
of the
there.
sun is much bigger.
You have to get the notes
It's a great
from this
question.
this year.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I asked a question because I watched Shir.
The whole shir you went through?
Yeah.
So Rashi says, Ezo Chag Shachodesh Miskasabah. So now which Yom Tif is a Yom Tif of Keseh? Every other Yom Tif, Pesach is the 15th day of the month. There's no cover-up of the moon. Sukkot is the 15th day of the month. There's no cover-up of the moon. Chanukah and Purim are Yom Tovim Midirabbanan, and they're anyway not in days of cover-up of the moon. Shavuos is, again, Vav Sivin is not at the day of cover-up of the moon. This moon you could see. Ezo Chag Shachodesh Miskasabah. When is Bakeseh l'Yom Chagenu? A Yom Chagenu that's characterized by Keseh? We know the answer. There's only one Yom Tov like that. Have a Yom Hazeh Rosh Hashanah. So when it says Tiku B'Chodesh Shofar, what does it mean? It means Tiku Rosh Chodesh. You should blow on the new moon Shofar. Bakeseh l'Yom Chagenu, the holiday that is celebrated when you have Chodesh, when you have the new moon. In other words, when the moon is covered up.
Hanukkah is Rabban because Hanukkah also has Rosh Chodesh. They have to have
Huh?
Hanukkah also has Rosh
You're
Chodesh.
right.
They have to have
Part of Chanukah. But it doesn't begin by Keseh, huh? According to Bishama, you're right. Uksiv. So we know that what this pasuk is talking about is Rosh Hashanah, even though it doesn't say the word Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't say the word Tishrei, but it says Bakeseh l'Yom Chagenu. Uksiv, right after that it says, you should blow shofar. Why? Ki choik li Yisrael hu mishpat l'lekei Yaakov. It's a time of a choik, a law established for the Jewish people, and then we say right after that it's mishpat, it's a time of justice for l'kei Yaakov. So we have a clear pasuk in Tehillim Kapitel Pei Aleph, which indicates that the first day of Tishrei, which is Rosh Hashanah Bakeseh l'Yom Chagenu, is the Yom HaMishpat. That's the source that Rosh Hashanah is Yom HaDin. Tehillim Pei Aleph, Shir Shel Yom of Yom Chamishi, and that's what Rav Nachman Yitzchak says. Rosh Hashanah l'Shana means it's the Reishis Hashanah Vad Achar Hashanah. So when it says in Ekev, Mei Reishis Hashanah Vad Achar Hashanah, it's referring to what's Reishis Hashanah. I don't know what Reishis Hashanah is, but from Tehillim I see Reishis Hashanah is Echad B'Tishrei, and that's the Mishpat l'Lekei Yaakov, and that's why it says from the beginning of the year till the end of the year, because he's examining what's going to happen this year and deciding the fate and the destiny and the unique mission of this year. I think I told you once, there's a beautiful word from the Divrei Yoel, from the Satmar Rebbe. He says, why does it say Mereishis Hashana Vad Acharis Shana? Al Pi Diktuk, either you say Mereishis Hashana Vad Acharis Hashana, or Mereishis Shana Vad Acharis Shana. For example, in English, you say from the beginning of the year till the end of the year, or from the beginning of a year till the end of a year, not from the beginning of the year till the end of a year. So he said that people in the beginning of the year, most people have this feeling that this is going to be Hashana. It's going to be the year of my life. This is going to be unbelievable. You know, you remember the first day in yeshiva, you come in, a fresh chavrusa, a fresh Rebbe, everything is good. It's going to be the year. And then the year goes by. A week later, you get thrown out. The week goes by, they come the end of the year. Another year bites the dust. Another year bites the dust. You know, this is going to be the year I'm going to make my dreams come true. So it's another. So the Torah is saying you should just know this is how life works. So first of all, don't get depressed. There's going to be a new year. And second of all, try to make sure that the end of the year should also be able to be Hashan and not just Shana. So I said we say in Hu Elokeinu in Musaf of Shabbos, Hein ga'alta yeschem, acharis kivreishis. That the acharis should be able to be like the Bereshis, should be able to be Hashanah, should be able to be the year. So Mela, what's Reishis Hashanah is Echad Tishrei. Zog the Gemarah. Reb Nachman Yitzchak. We have three interpretations. Reb Papa says it's Shtaris, Reb Zayda says it's Kufas, Reb Nachman says it's judgment, din.
But the word was actually clear according to Rabbi.
You could say, but it says in Tehillim that this is the time of Mishpat. You don't have to say anymore that the Mishnah is following Rebbe Lezer, B'Tishrei Nivra, and according to Rav Papa, you also don't have to say it follows Rebbe Lezer, because L'shtaris is not Negeya, Malchei Yom Esoilim, they count for Tishrei. Yeah, it's not Negeya, yeah. Zog the Gemarah weiter.
What's the difference? But then if somebody doesn't do tzir, it carries on to the next year anyways.
What's the difference of what?
If you get Rosh Hashanah.
No, this is the day the Rebbeinu Shalom specially examines every person's life and the whole world. You know, it's the cheshbon hanefesh. He makes a cheshbon hanefesh, vusa halt of the Welt.
That's why the person ignores it.
Why?
It's a new account.
Huh?
You can ignore it, but it happened.
You're not the same person.
It's happening, but you ignore it.
The person ignores it.
Huh?
Even the person ignores it starts a new year.
Yeah. On some level, listen, if a person is open to it, so then they can experience it more. Zog the Gemarah weiter, Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis taught, Ki choykli Yisrael hu mishpat lelechei Yankov, melamed, the beautiful limud melamed, she'ein bezdin shel mayla nechnosin ledin elim ken kitchu bezdin shel matas hachodesh. Bezdin shel mata would not go in to the din of Rosh Hashanah until they don't make sure that bezdin shel mata was mekadosh the chodesh. In other words, bezdin shel mayla, so to speak, has to wait. What happens lamata? Is it time of Yom Hadin? We don't know. If they made it Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, so Yom Hadin. But what if Elul had 30 days? So then it starts a day later. So Bezdin Shalamayla will not go into the Yom Hadin until they look at Bezdin Shalamata. That's Pshat Ki Choykli Yisrael Hu Mishpat Lelekei Yaakov. It's Yisrael that have to begin the process, and then Elekei Yaakov could make the Mishpat based on Yisrael. But it's always Kitchu Bezdin Shalamata Sachodesh. Yeah. Yisrael Inu Dikachinul Izmanim. Yeah. So Bezdin Shalamata is Nechasin Ladin. After Kitchu Bezdin Lamata, there's no din if the Jew was not Mekadesh Lamata the Chodesh. There's also the Remez, there's a word, you talk about Uman, in the Kutei Maharan, Reb Nachman of Breslov brings from his Elter Zayda from the Baal Shem Tov. He says, the Baal Shem Tov once said, it says in Pirkei Avos, Lifnei miya ta'osid litein din v'cheshbon. So the question is, Pashat and Diktuk, first comes the cheshbon, then comes the din. Cheshbon is the calculation, din is the verdict. You don't first make the verdict and then make the cheshbon. That's a corrupt court. You first have a din, then you make a cheshbon. And then he says, also it says in Pirkei Avos, v'nefroyin min ha'adam midaitoi, v'shaloi midaitoi. You exact payment from a person consciously and unconsciously. What's pshat? So the Baal Shem Nachman brings from his Zayda Baal Shem Tov that he touched, that generally throughout life, people are given an opportunity to judge people all the time. Right? Baruch Hashem, we have people we meet, you could judge people all the time, Yomim v'layla, 24 hours a day, and some people are busy with that. So Baal Shem Tov says, B'shah somebody comes to Bezdin Shalmayla, they don't start judging his life. That's not how it works. Basically, they show him another person's life, and basically, he has to give judgment, or they show him how he already judged over all of the years. And then they show him that everything he judged on another person, somehow throughout his life he did the same thing, or something similar. So basically it starts with a din, and then it starts with a cheshbon. Then it's a cheshbon. First is a din on somebody else. And then they say, oh, let's make a cheshbon here. Here, this is your life. So basically you already made a judgment for yourself. Nobody has to judge you.
There are another two levels. There's when you judge somebody good, or you don't judge at all.
Yeah.
That's the Kshay Tasma.
Yeah. So Nefrayim in Adam Midaita.
The guy says a din b'cheshbon.
Yeah.
You know what he says?
Yeah, beautiful Torah.
And then you do. The din is not what you did wrong.
Right. Cheshbon is. He
He
could have done. He could have done. So that's pshat Midaita v'shaloi Midaita. It's all Midaita. You decided, but it's shaloi Midaita because you're deciding it on somebody else. Yeah. And then the shalom, it's midaita is I decide what's going to happen to me, but shalom midaita because I think I'm deciding it on you, and really I'm deciding it on myself.
It's a supposed to haskell the whole year.
Yes. Before you judge a person, remember you're judging yourself.
But judging is not negative or positive. It's just a consequence.
Yeah. You can judge very positively. They say in English, you point a finger at somebody, at that moment you're pointing 3 fingers at yourself. See?
Right.
You see, look, I'm pointing 3 fingers at myself. In Yiddish, there's an expression, "Eshiltzich." When you say he curses, you don't say "Eshiltzich." And he says this explains a story you have after the story of David and Bathsheba in Tanakh. So Nasan Hanavi came to David HaMelech and he tells him this whole beautiful story. There was this guy who had only a sheep, and there was this wealthy man who had a lot of food. And this poor man came to the wealthy man. He wanted a meal, so the wealthy man stole the sheep from the poor man to give it to the poor man. Stole the sheep to give it to his guest. In other words, even though he had so many sheep, and this guy only had 1 sheep, he stole it from him and he slaughtered it. So he asks David, "What's the verdict for this guy?" He says, "This guy is a lowlife. He should be killed." So Nasan Hanavi says, "Ata ha'ish, you're that man." There was a man, Uriah Hachiti, he had nothing. He just had 1 woman, Bathsheba. You're the king. You have everything, and you take his wife. So David HaMelech says 2 words, Chatasi Lasha. I said it. So the trail is, why did he have to make this whole just tell him, look what you did. So he says, because nobody can judge you, you have to judge yourself. So he told David HaMelech a different story. David HaMelech said what the halach is. And then he says, Ata ha'ish. This is what the Nachman brings the name of the Baal Shem Tov. What's the nekuda of this? The nekuda of this also brings out the koyach of a Jew. That nobody ultimately can tell you where to go. Not to Gan Eden, not to Gehenna, not even Bezdin Shalom Ayla. Kavayachal, the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't tell you where to go. You're the only one who decides where you go. So when the Gemarah says here, Ein Bezdin Shalom Ayla nechnasin l'din elim ken kitchu Bezdin Shalom Matas HaChodesh, it's not only collectively on Klal Yisrael, it's also individually. Bezdin Shalom Ayla never goes into a din to tell a din on anybody unless you were already Mekadosh the Chodesh. You had to decide. You were ready, and if in the positive you were Mekadosh the Chodesh, then the whole din is different. Sag the Gemarah weiter, Tanya Yidach, we learned another brayse, Ki choik li Yisrael, hu ein li ela li Yisrael. I see that it's a time of din for the Jewish people. Lumas ha'olam minayin, Talmud loyma mishpat lelekei Yaakov. Choik li Yisrael is for the Jew. Mishpat lelekei Yaakov is for everybody else. Zak Rashi, Shachodesh miskasa boy lirechoikim. What's the problem? The problem Rashi has there, 1 second. Rosh Hashanah is already Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is because witnesses saw the moon, so it's not Bekesa. Remember, witnesses came to Bezdin, and they say, we saw the moon last night, the 29 at night we saw the moon, so Bezdin makes 30 Rosh Chodesh. So it's not Chodesh Miskasa, but it says L'rechoikim, people who are further. Kegoin Shachrus L'bnei Ma'ariv, Va'arvis L'bnei Mizrach. In the morning for those on the west, at night for those in the east. So generally speaking, it's bekesser for at least many people. It's not a time when you'll be able to have the vision of the moon like other times of the month. There'll only be a few hours during the day that you will be able to see it, and it depends. In the west you won't see it in the morning, and in the east you won't see it in the evening. Zakte weiter, Elim kein Kitshu HaChodesh, V'hachi kamenim, Kavu Yisrael es Choik HaChodesh, Yehi Mishpat LaKadosh Baruch Hu. It has to start with Choik Yisrael, and then the Rebbeinu Shalom could say, Mishpat L'Lekei Yaakov. Without the Jews, he can't do the Mishpat. How do you know that it's also for non-Jews? Because it says Mishpat L'Lekei Yaakov. Zakte Braise weiter, Im kein Ma Tamad Loimach Choik Yisrael. If everybody's being judged, so just say everybody's being judged. Why do you single out the Jewish people? Malamet Yisrael Nechnasin Tchila L'Din. Because the Jewish people are judged first.
How does the Lashon of the Yaakov? Yisrael and the Yaakov, how does that goes into something? Because you have no choice, or because there's a rabbis on the Yaakov?
He says Yisrael, so what do you mean?
Why is it?
You mean that's Yaakov? You mean Dafka Yaakov?
Yeah. Why does he call that a Yaakov?
You mean why it changes to why Yaakov Dafka?
Yeah. And Luma Zeh for Yisrael. His name was Yaakov, and we changed it to Yisrael. That's the Luma Zeh.
Of Yisrael and Yaakov.
It has to be, I don't know.
That's something Yaakov is connected right here. But Yisrael Nechnasin L'Tchila L'Din, Kedei Reb Chizda Amar Reb Chizda Melech V'Tzibur. If you have a king and an entire community and they're being judged, Melech Nichnas Tchila L'Din. So you first judge the king. Shenemar, Tefillah of Shlomo HaMelech, when he builds the Beis HaMikdash, he says, Lasois Mishpat Avdoi U Mishpat Amoi. Dvar Yom B'Yom. Last is Mishpat Avdoi. First is Mishpat Avdoi, which is his servant Shlomo HaMelech, whom he calls Avdoi, and then is Mishpat Am Yisrael. In other words, the prominent one, the king, goes first. My timer. What's the reason? It's not derech eretz, or means it's not the derech of the world. It's not respectful that the king should stand outside. In other words, that he should just wait outside. So therefore, you do the king first. It's the covet of the melech. The Ibai say another reason is mekamed the leipush charoin af. Before the king gets very upset, once he starts judging everybody else, and he can get very upset, so then you don't want the king should actually go into judgment. So therefore, the king goes into judgment first. Rashi, melech v'tzibur k'shakadosh baruch hu donos melech nichnas tchila mishpat avdei shloime k'amalei comes first. The leipush charoin af b'shvil avoynes tzibur, because of the sins of the tzibur. So therefore, you have the king being judged first, and that's why the din of the Jewish people precedes the din of the other ummas, because of both reasons. First of all, it's not derech eretz that they should wait, and number two, there should not be charoin af once we see what is going on in the world at large by many of the nations of the world. Zog the Gemarah. Yes, Rabbi Litzman.
When you judge people, aren't you supposed to be very partial and level-headed? So where does
Charoin af you mean?
where does it come in?
Als man, the Eibsh is in Shayach's man first, second, he can do everything the same. Hashem can do everything in a split second also, it's not Shayach, it's man.
But we doesn't say that.
He's saying it's not a fair judgment, he's saying that they're after, they were first Karanaf, after he sees them, then there's every Karanaf. Shayach's man, Hashem first, second, Hashem with everything that goes, knows man.
Sounds like it's scary, right? He's angry at you.
In the Shoyim?
In Moshe felt anger of Hashem. Kind of like it says
So Santa Shaila here.
He wasn't saying that. I understand what he's saying.
He's saying the you have to be impartial. What's the charoin af? You get upset, so you change the din. It's a good shaila. What did you ask about Zman? That he's being judged first or not first? It's a mushal. It's a mushal. Obviously, it doesn't mean literally in time. It means.
Question was, why did it single out?
He understands that somebody goes first, just understand what the eye is.
You say it, it's wonderful, it's terrific, it's wonderful. The Melech Tzibur, I understand that, but how do you know that Yisrael was killed in there?
Chokli Stol Hu Mishpat
How do you know that?
The order.
Although the pasuk,
Pasha the order. I don't think he means more.
Yeah, but he's bringing a raya from Melech Tzibur.
No, he's
Yisrael is Yisrael.
no. Based on the Bechizda's Vart, we explain in the pasuk.
Tell me based on Chizah that the Melech
The Melech Nichnas Chila from Shlomo Melech. First. So b'meila, according to this, you can explain just like a melech.
Somebody goes first.
Since Kol Yisrael b'nei melachim hem. No, in other words, b'tzad chshivas hamelech. B'tzad chshivas, it just brings out b'tzad chshivas of the melech. L'chayra, so therefore k'chayk Yisrael. Okay, let's turn off here. Zog the Gemarah weiter. 8a-8b Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah l'shmitten. It's also Rosh Hashanah l'shmitten, for Shmita. What does it mean for Shmita? That when you say the 7th year is Shmita, what's the 7th year? When does the 7th year begin? It begins 8a-8b Tishrei. How do you know? Maybe the 8a-8b Tishrei doesn't begin Shmita. How do you know that's the date when you're not allowed to anymore work your field? You can't plow, you can't plant, you can't seal your field and cut it off from everybody else. You have to keep it open. How do you know this is the time? The pasuk says in Parshas Bahar, "Ubashana hashviyis Shabbos Shabboson yiyeh la'aretz." The pasuk says, on the 7th year you should have a Shabbos Shabboson for the land. Sadcha lo sizra v'charmecha lo sizma. You shouldn't plant your field. You shouldn't prune your vineyard. So it says Shana Hashvius. V'gamar Shana Shana mitishrei. Here we make a Gzeira Shava. It says Ubashana Hashvius in this pasuk. It says by Tishrei also the word Shana. The Ksiv we have in Parshas Eikev later. This is Parshas Bahar. Parshas Eikev we have Meireshis Hashana Vad Achris Shana. And we established that the Hashana over there is talking about what? What's Reshis Hashana? It's talking about Tishrei because Tiku B'Chodesh Shofar B'Kasaliyim Chagenu. So therefore we say just like Bereshis Hashana is when? Tishrei. So when it says Bashana Hashviyis, I need to know when in the 7th year. When does that 7th year? I say it's Echad B'Tishrei. Frag the Gemarah 1 second. It's not the only time it says Hashana in Chumash. V'ligmer Hashana Shana min Nisan. The Ksiv Rishon Hu Lachem L'Chot Hashana. It says about the month of Nisan, it's the first month of the year in Parshas Boy. So you could say when it says Ubashana Hashviyis, compare it to L'Chotche Hashana, and say that Nisan, that's Shana Hashviyis, that's the beginning of Shana Hashviyis. I am not asking about other months. Why I'm not asking other months? Because you don't find Hashana by other months in Chumash, but you find it by Tishrei, and you find it by Nisan, which is very interesting. You don't have Hashana anywhere else. You have Reishis Hashana in Eikev, and you have L'Chotche Hashana in Boy. But why are you choosing Tishrei over Nisan? Why are you discriminating against Nisan? And for the Gemarah, Danin Shana She'eni Machadashim Mishana She'eni Machadashim Ve'in Danin Shana She'eni Machadashim Mishana She'ashem Machadashim. Meaning, our Shana, Bashana Hashviyis doesn't mention months. It just says the 7th year. So now I'm looking around the Chumash and I'm looking for a definition of Shana. When is my 7th year? So I look. I could go L'Chotche Hashana and I could go Meireshis Hashana. But there's an advantage in Reishis Hashana. Why? Because my Shana and Bashana Hashviyis doesn't mention months. So I would rather derive the meaning from the Shana in Chumash that also doesn't mention months. Just mentions a year. Meireshis Hashana, Vadach Hashana, which is like Bashana Hashviyis. Rather than deriving the meaning of the Shana that doesn't mention months from the year that is mentioned together with months, which is Achodesh Azalochem Reish Chodosh Mishnu Lechem L'Chotche Hashana. So therefore, you're right. The Gzeira Shava is a Gzeira Shava that can work from both, but I don't know which Gzeira Shava to choose. So when I have a choice between two psukim, what do? I will choose the pasuk that is more similar. If I wouldn't have the pasuk Meireshis Hashana, I would be forced to go L'Chotche Hashana, and I don't have a problem with that. But when you have two different sources and you could choose one over the other, you choose the Gzeira Shava that is more similar to the pasuk that you want to explain. So therefore, when I have a choice, I go to Meireshis Hashana, and therefore Chazal derived that Bashana Hashviyis means when? Tishrei, and that's why our Mishnah says Be'echad B'Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah Lishmitten. Rashi says Minolon Sheshnas Shmitten Mekudeshes from Rosh Hashanah. Of course, he means Rosh Hashanah Echad B'Tishrei, our Rosh Hashanah. V'asur ba'avodas hakarka. How do you know this? There's no source for this. You just know there's a year, and the answer is Gzeira Shava from Reishis Hashana. What do you say?
We had it before in Gemarah, this discussion.
About Shemitah? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not like about Shemitah.
So why does the Gemarah say that's different, that the Nisan is different than the other guys? Because the Bashuna Shvi says in the 7th year. Yes?
No.
It's the start of the year.
Yeah.
Basically, the Hashem of the Hashashura doesn't say the start of the year. It's the start of the month within the year. So the Shvius is more similar in meaning to Tishrei than the one that's said by Nisan.
I think that's what the Gemarah means. I think that's part of what the Gemarah means. The Gemarah doesn't only mean a technical thing, that here it says Chadashim and here it doesn't say Chadashim. I think the Gemarah also means a thematic, a Chilik and Teichen. That here, you're talking about the year as a whole year. Shana Hashviyis, or Reishis Hashana Achar Shana. You're talking about a whole, you're spanning the whole year in one shot. Reishis Hashana Achar Shana, or Shana Hashviyis. And here, you're also beginning a year. You're saying Rishon Ulachem L'Chotche Hashana, but L'Gabe months. In other words, this is the first month of the 12 months of the year. L'Chayda, that's part of it. That when you could compare it to this, rather than this, it's much geschmack, because over there you're talking about the first month of the 12 months of the year. But you're dividing the year into 12 units, And this is the first unit of the 12 units, where Rosh Hashanah and Shana Shviz, you're not dividing the year in units. It's just one collective year.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.